Welcome to Slate Church Online. We are so glad that you're tuning in today, and we pray that this message will bless you no matter where you're watching from. If this message impacts you today, we would love to hear about it. Send an email to mystory@slatechurch.com.
How's everybody doing? Yeah? Say it good? It's my Aussie accent. Seems like everybody in the church these days has an Australian accent. I can't stand Australia. It doesn't exist. I'm kidding. I was like, is this the kind of church we go to? Pastor doesn't even believe in... let's move on. How you guys doing? Doing good. Really excited for this message. Of course, we're in Heart for the House series, and so you can take down this title if you're writing notes. I'm going to jump right into it. I'm calling it tonight, Turn Back. Is that good? All right. You can't say no to that because I'll take note and embarrass you from the platform. But it's good to see everybody. It's good to be in God's house, and it's really good to just have this opportunity to come into this season and allow God to do His thing in our hearts. You know, I actually look forward to Heart for the House every single year. I look forward to this season because I just find that going throughout the year, so often money can get us. It can get us entangled, and I just find that so many times, like the stories that we just listened to, there's a process where God actually releases us from the things that have a hold of us. And I'm really excited for all that's going to happen throughout this season. And I'm going to be sharing out of a story tonight. And this story has to do with some lepers, people that had leprosy. Now, leprosy is not something that we deal with in North America. And in the ancient Near East, it actually had something to do, or it was a generic term that actually just described general skin diseases, okay? If you had a general skin disease, whether you're all covered in white, like leprosy was supposed to manifest itself in your body or on your body, or you just had a general skin disease, they just called it leprosy, and they sent you outside the city, and you had to be out there, and you were in a camp with a bunch of other people that had skin diseases, and I don't know, you just talked to the other people that had skin diseases, but you weren't allowed to come back in the city. And so during this time, people were very aware of this, and they stayed away from it. There was one other group of people during this time that the Jews specifically actually avoided, and they were called Samaritans. You may have heard about the Samaritans. You may know a little bit about the Samaritans. But Samaritans were people that they're basically a mixed breed is the way that the Jews described them. Not the way that we would describe them in modern days. Somebody's like, oh my gosh, did he just call them that? No, literally that's what they titled and termed the Samaritans during this time. And they were actually foreigners that had intermarried with the Jewish people. And the Jewish people at that time believed that had actually, that the mixed race thing, that was a no-go, and they were actually quite offended by it. You see, King Assyria in the year 722 BC actually brought a bunch of foreign people and parked them right beside the Israelites, beside the Jews at the time. And he said basically like live in harmony. And what started happening is those foreigners started marrying the Jews, and so the Jews were really upset. In fact, so upset that they were told you're not allowed to interact with these people. You're supposed to stay as far apart from these people as possible, and you're not allowed to welcome them into our places of worship. And so when the Jews rebuilt the temple and started to celebrate the presence of God again, they basically shunned the Samaritans outside the city. And so basically Samaritans were treated the same as lepers, in that you never touch them, don't talk to them, and keep them outside of our cities, keep them outside of our nation. And so it's very interesting that we pick up a story in Luke chapter 17, and you can follow along on the back screen with me. Luke chapter 17, where Jesus has a close encounter with somebody that fits this description. It says, now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. In some translations, it says that he had to pass through Samaria in order to get to where he was going. Jesus was literally approaching the cross. He was making his journey back to Jerusalem to die on the cross. And in some translations, it says he had to go through Samaria. But it's just not true. There's actually routes that the Jews would take in order to avoid Samaria. But I love this detail because as Jesus passed by Samaria, he did it because he's not looking to get around the issues that are going on in our lives, but he's actually looking to walk straight through them and impact them in a positive way. Isn't that good news to us that kind of mess up from time to time? I don't know, I might just be the only sinner in the room, but I'm thankful that Jesus walks into my Samaria and heals me of all my diseases and makes me clean again. It says, as he was going into a village, and there it is, 10 men who had leprosy met him. 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. Now, it was expected that the lepers during this day would actually shout from afar and warn people that they were there so that you wouldn't come into close contact with them and be defiled by the disease that they're having. So they're just doing what is natural. They're yelling and saying, Jesus, have mercy on us. When he saw them, he said, go show yourselves to the priest, which was the custom of the day in order to actually be pronounced clean. As they went, they were cleansed. And you got to know, church, that this is good news for us today because so many of us believe that there's a destination where we are going to be completely sinless. The truth is that you will continue to commit sin, but in the eyes of God through Jesus, you will always be seen as righteous because it's on your way of being purified that God cleanses you. It's not arriving at a destination where somehow you're no longer sinning, but it's in the process of you ridding sin in your life that God is already looking at you as cleansed through his Son and the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. This is good news. One of them, and we would call this the smart one. Isn't that like the percentage of people that are sometimes seem smart in our society? Like one of them, 10%. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. And you know what? This is why we do praise reports every single week at Slate Church, because we don't want to praise God 10% of the time he does something in our lives. We want to turn back as often as possible and thank God for everything that he's doing in our lives, because we don't want to allow the 90% to be forgotten, but we want to remind ourselves, not God, but ourselves of all that God is actually doing in our lives. It says he threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. This is what I call a double-double. There's a Samaritan and a leper. Basically, the kind of person that could not approach Jesus. And I just think, if you're in this room and you think that you're the kind of person that should not approach Jesus, that you think that the roof is going to cave in on you when you come into church, that somehow God wants nothing to do with you, that you've got the double-double, the curse and the sin all over your life, I just want to remind you that these kind of people, for some reason, find themselves at the feet of Jesus more often because they understand that Jesus is all about not condemnation, but actually bringing about life transformation. And so we just want to welcome you here because this is a place where you're actually welcome. And it's Jesus asked, he said, we're not all 10 cleansed. Come on, church, let's be a church where Jesus does not have to ask us. Weren't you all impacted by my goodness? Why is it only a few of you turning back and worshiping me during the worship and praise time? Why is it just a few of you lifting up your hands and surrender to everything that I've done when I've tried to transform every part of you? And again, it's not about the physical act of raising your hands, but are our hearts at a posture where we are praising God for all that he has done? And of course, it's a rhetorical question, but he says, where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? So often the people that think that they're right with God, that think that they don't need to come and repent, or they don't need to come and give thanks, or they don't need to come and do all the things that God has called them to do. And it's so great to have Sundays like this where we have baptism Sundays, because there's people that have just met Jesus for the first time. They're getting baptized, and they're reminding us that have followed Jesus for quite some time that the true and proper response to God doing something in your life is turning back and proclaiming his goodness over your life. And so that's why we do baptism Sundays. Then he said to them, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. Should we pray? All right, let's pray. Jesus, I thank you so much for what you're up to. God, I thank you so much for everything that you're doing in this place today. I thank you for the baptisms that have already happened in our church, and I thank you for the baptisms that are going to happen tonight. Jesus, we pray that as we come here and we listen to your voice and we listen to all that you want to do inside of us. God, I pray that we would be very attentive to what you're saying. May we be open to hearing your voice and not close it off. Jesus, we pray this in the mighty name of God. Everybody said, amen. All right. Turn to somebody and say, I'm turning back. That's awesome. I also, if you see me walking around funny, it's because I played 3 hours of squash yesterday with Pastor Luke and Jared over here, and the culprit is actually Josh Weber, who was much better than us. And he probably didn't move at all, but we moved a lot. Anyway, so if I'm walking around funny, it's because I've never lunged like that in my life. Some of you are all into the lunges. You're like, lunges are my favorite. Like, you see people in the gym like this. I'm like, you look ridiculous. That's all squash is lunges. But anyway, I've been through my fair share of education. I've been through my fair share of making sure that I'm ready to, I educate myself to hopefully an adequate degree every time I come and preach on a Sunday. I want to know my stuff. I want to learn. I read lots of commentaries. I read lots of Bible thesauruses, not thesauruses, dictionaries. Bible thesauruses. It's basically the Bible just using words that sound like the other words, but they're just different words. It would probably, somebody should write that. It would probably sell in a Christian bookstore somewhere. But I've done my job to educate myself, but nothing would educate me for what it looked like to get kids into a vehicle as you're trying to leave somewhere. The truth is that parenting is the biggest learning curve you'll ever go through. And so if you're stagnated in your learning, go have some kids, because it's probably not the motivation for having kids you should have. But I'm telling you, having kids is a constant learning process of whoa, I don't really know anything. And these little kids are looking up to me like I should know something, and I'm just not going to let them in on the secret that I basically know nothing, But it's always an interesting thing, trying to get kids into a car. I remember one time getting so frustrated with Kenzie because every time we got her into the car and then we arrived at a place, she would take off her shoes and her socks, and it'd be the middle of winter, and I'd be like, do you not understand the purposes of shoes? Okay, let me break it down for you. And she's 1.5 years old. She's looking at me like, what in the world? And so it surprises me every time, we're having another child coming up, and this will be the third. And it just surprises me every time we get to this stage, because of course Theo's 1.5 years in, and what is he doing? He's doing the same thing, taking off his shoes, taking off his socks. I'm like, son, I have such big hopes for you. I thought you were going to be the one, you're going to go to the NHL and provide us with our retirement, and you can't even keep your shoes and your socks on in the middle of winter, son. But, getting your kids into the car is half the trouble, and of course, they're fighting you, and they always have a different idea of how it should be done up, and thank God for the Wiggles, because they came out with a song. Does anybody know who the Wiggles are? Who doesn't know who the Wiggles are? These are the most blessed people among us, actually. If you haven't heard the Wiggles, then you've experienced heaven on earth. If you have experienced the Wiggles, then you have experienced the opposite on earth. Okay, but the Wiggles have this song, buckle up, da 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 da, buckle up, da da da, and honestly, that's all I remember is da 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 da. And literally, when you're going to sleep as a parent at night, this just goes through your mind over and over and over. I swear, I walked to that beat in my life. So thankfully they came out with this song, because it just helps a little bit more with the kids getting in the car. But the problem with getting kids in the car is actually, or just getting anywhere as a parent, is actually not really the kids in our issue. I want to let you in on a little, something I just got to get off my chest, because the kids aren't the problem in just trying to get out the door. And neither is Emma. This isn't going to turn into working on our marriage in front of you kind of message, okay? But the bigger problem is that I can't seem to remember what I need to bring on the trip ever. Ask my in-laws. Every time I leave their house after dinner, I run back into the house for something at least once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times. And it's starting to freak me out because it's without fail. I'll leave the house and I'll be like, all right, remember you left something inside. What is it? And I'm like, I got the keys. I got that. All right, I got to go. And then I get in the car and I'm driving away and I'm like, oh, Theo, I forgot Theo. And I go back inside. Never happened. Has never happened. But I'm always forgetting stuff and I've got to go back. But most often I'm trying to leave the house and I've forgotten my keys inside, or I've left and I've forgotten someone's bottle, or I've left and I've forgotten my shoes, Theo gets it after his father. But, all this stuff starts to happen. And what I've started to realize, at least through going through life, is that progress is great as long as you have everything you need to go forward. It's great to get in your car and go somewhere, but if you don't have everything you need to get to the journey or the destination you're going, also known as, if you don't have your car keys, you can't actually get out of the driveway. Sometimes the best idea is actually to turn back. Say it with me, turn back. You see, we live in a society that is a fast-forward society. We live in a society that says run as fast as you can, because when you're running as fast as you can, then you're going to be able to accomplish all the dreams that are on your hearts. Those dreams where your parents are like, hey, dream bigger. And you tell them, you're like, I want to be an actor. And they're like, okay, maybe dream a little bit bigger than that, Well, I want to be just dream. And our parents and the generation that we grew up in, and this isn't just my generation, it seems like every parent has always wanted their kids to live up to some dream that is bigger than the dream that is in their hearts. And dream bigger, you can be anything. And the truth is as I said a few weeks ago, that all of these dreams actually cause a paralysis in our hearts and our minds, because with all the options available to us in this world, we actually don't know where to go because all the doors are open and none of them are actually closed. I'm actually thankful that my dad told me I'm never going to go to the NHL. He looked at me and said, son, you don't have what it takes, so don't try to go to the NHL. Which is why I want my son to know he can make it to the NHL. I'm kidding. And Theo's not going to the NHL. No, but for real, I'm thankful that my dad actually guided me into what I'm doing today. He saw the potential in my life. He pointed me in the direction, and he affirmed it. But here's the thing. If we just keep running fast forward into everything that is happening, we actually will sometimes get snagged and forget that we're actually missing valuable aspects of who we need to be as followers of Jesus and as productive members of society if all we're doing is sprinting to the finish line. I don't know if anybody uses PVRs anymore. Does anybody still use PVR? Does anybody still use cable? Does anybody still tape shows onto VHSs and play them back? Really? You're amazing. I want to talk to you after because you're a legend. But we watch PVR, and Emma and I don't just use a PVR. We are as old school to PVR Survivor. Every time I say this in front of people, I get mixed reactions. Some people are like, okay, I can't trust you. Other people are like, it's still on air? Yes, it is. It's the best show in the world. And I'm so competitive. I'm like, I could do that, And we'll often PVR Survivor, and then we watch it on Wednesday nights after, all the stuff that we got to do is done. And without fail, you know what happens when you're watching a PVR show? If you've watched only Netflix and you have no clue what a PVR is, I can't help you with this part of my sermon. You got to at least do your history, lessons before you come to church on what technology is and all the rest. But Em and I will often PVR, and then we'll fast forward through the commercials. We thought this was the best thing until Netflix came in and just eradicated commercials. Or just their entire show became commercials, so one or the other. But we'll fast forward through the PVR and Survivor. And without fail, every single time you fast forward through commercials, you just tap the fast forward button one too many times. It goes from one triangle, you're like, oh, I think I can stop it with 2. And then two triangles are going forward, which means you're fast forwarding it even more. You're like, you know what, I think I'm feeling lucky tonight, and I feel like I'm skilled. Those arcade games where you got to stop the button and get the tickets? It's like, oh, I can do faster, So you got 3 triangles going, you're like, okay, I'm feeling really good tonight. And you get 4 triangles going. Without fail, you always stop the show a minute in. And you're like, what's the use of this? I missed the whole thing. They left me on a cliffhanger, and then I missed what the cliffhanger was all about. And now I got a idea about what the cliffhanger is, and you're like, rewind it, you push back. And there's this little freak out in your marriage, and you're like, oh my gosh, do I love this? It doesn't go quite that far. But, you're just like what's happening? And so you stop and you rewind. The problem is that I think that we live in a society that is running so fast and telling us to just go faster and run faster and keep moving forward and chase the next thing. And your dreams are just over the next hill. And don't slow down because everybody else is running fast. And if you're not training, somebody else is. And you're going to be slower than them if you don't keep running forward. And the problem with this is that often we are missing things along the way. We forgot to say, I love you to our spouse. We forgot to mention to somebody at work that they did a good job. We forget to mention to so-and-so that we actually are appreciating their friendship. And we just keep running fast forward. And what we're doing is we're actually missing all of the blessings along the way. I'm so thankful for a story like this where Jesus heals somebody and heals a bunch of people. And one of them recognizes in the pursuit of everything that they are actually going after in life, that it's actually important to just take a pause, turn back, and experience the real blessing. I love this quote from C.S. Lewis, and I've read it before, but it's actually quite interesting. He says this, he says, progress means getting nearer to the place you want to be. And if you have taken a wrong turn, then to go forward does not get you any nearer. If you are on the wrong road, progress means doing an about turn. It means turning back and walking back to the right road. And in that case, the person who turns back soonest is the most progressive one. And we live in a society that is shouting that we are making the most progress that we've ever lived. We live in a progressive society. But the problem with the progressive society is you're only progressing if you're actually headed in the right direction. I want to ask you tonight, is it time to look behind you and actually turn back and realize maybe some of the things that we've missed along the way? Maybe it's time to turn back and recognize some of the blessings that we've missed. To turn back and recognize some of the things that we've missed. To turn back and recognize some of the people that we've missed. To turn back and recognize maybe some of the things that God has been doing in our life all along, and actually recognizing that Jesus actually needs to get the glory for all of it. I found this interesting, and as a kid I had heard this story, and so I decided to do a little bit of research into it, and I just heard this fact about Bill Gates, and so I did some research, and sure enough, it's true. Do you know that Bill Gates is worth $72 billion? And he's probably worth more since the moment that this article came out. But he's worth $72 billion. And so if Bill Gates, get this, if Bill Gates was walking along the road, assuming that he is earning a 6% interest on his $72 billion, which is quite average for where he's actually at with his investments, and he's earning 6% on that $72 billion, it means that he is earning $114 every minute. Every minute Bill Gates earns $114 off of his return on investment. So what this means is that if Bill Gates is walking along and all of a sudden $100 bills just started falling out of his back pocket, it would not be worth his investment, the time of his investment, to turn around and start picking them up second by second, because he would actually be losing money. Is this unfathomable to you? Like, he could just keep walking along, and every second he could be dropping $100 bills, and it would not be worth his time to walk back. Does anybody want to follow Bill Gates as he's walking along a road? Listen, God's blessing is nothing like Bill Gates. It's not worth saying, hey, it's not worth my time to turn back. It's not worth my time to actually give the praise where praise is due. It's not worth turning back. God's blessings only get received to their fullest when we do turn back. God's blessings are only realized in our hearts and our minds and actually become a reality in our lives when we actually turn back and we recognize all the things that God is actually doing. Until that time, they are selfish, but the moment that we turn back, all of a sudden we are able to actually give God the glory. You see, this Samaritan leper that was cleansed of his healing wanted to turn back to glorify God before he received the benefits of his healing. He wanted to give God the glory for his healing before he received the benefit of his healing. You know, this entire message can be applied to your life, whether you are here for the first time or whether or not you call yourself a follower of Jesus. But for those of us that are in our season of Heart for the House, this ought to frame our idea of what it actually means to receive blessing, receive financial blessing from God. Because so often what we do when we receive a job, there's so many prayer requests that come in about jobs, and I'm looking for a promotion. I'm in line for a promotion. I'm out of a job. I need a co-op job. I'm hoping for a co-op job in my sphere. I'm out of money. I have a lack of money and whatever else. And then weeks later, we'll actually read out praise reports, and it's about jobs being had and co-op jobs being given in the city, and people getting promotions and money being covered on things and all the rest. And the truth is that so often we receive that blessing and we just keep walking. But what would it look like to turn back after the blessing has been given and desire to give God glory before we actually saw the benefit? Some of you might know where I'm going with this, but this is literally called tithing. Isn't it? Tithing is actually turning back, giving God the glory for what he has provided to us before we ever actually take the benefit ourselves. The whole 100% is God's. It's all his. But what we do is we turn 100% that we believe is ours into 100% that is God's. And all of a sudden, God can do more with 10% than what we could do with the 90% on our own, or the 100% on our own. And all of a sudden, God gets the glory through the entire process. All of a sudden, our entire financial idea and what it means to actually have money and to be able to spend money and to be able to give money and to be able to save money and invest money is all of a sudden it's reframed inside the way that God sees money. It's reframed inside of God's economy. So I want to encourage you in a few different things as we begin to turn back as a church. Turn to your neighbor and say, turn back. The first thing that we need to do is turn back and count our blessings. I want to ask this question. Do you have your blessing, or does your blessing have you? This happens all the time. Somebody is praying to God and praying to God and praying to God. God, I need a girlfriend, or I need a boyfriend, And all of a sudden, they get the relationship they're so looking for, and then you never see them or talk to them ever again. It's like God provided them with exactly what they were looking for, and now they're never in church again because all of a sudden they're so consumed with the actual prayer request that they asked of God that it actually drives them away from his presence. Does your blessing have you, or do you have your blessing? There's a big difference. Because in counting our blessings, I've learned a couple of things, because it's so much easier to count the things that we don't have. Most of our world spends the majority of their time talking about the things that they don't have. Looking over at their neighbor's stuff and saying, well, I wish I had that, and looking over at what so-and-so has, and, well, I wish I had that, and you get a new phone, but all of a sudden a new phone is released, and you're thinking, well, I really need that, and we're counting all of the things that we don't have. The other day, Emma was driving, and she is a good driver, and I preface this because she did something with our van that good drivers don't generally do, but she is a good driver. The other day, she's driving along in a subdivision, and she was trying to avoid a parked car, but the ice actually threw her back into the driving lane and smoked the back of a car. She calls me. Obviously, Emma's pregnant. I'm freaking out. I'm like, are you okay? She's like, I'm okay. She's like, you won't believe this, but literally 15 minutes earlier, somebody hit the same car in the exact same spot at the same place, and they were actually on the phone with CAA trying to work it all out when I hit the car, and I was like, blessing, awesome. And sure enough, the cops also saw it as a blessing because they came and said, you didn't do any additional damage. And so we were super happy because we actually didn't get anything charged to us and all the rest. And I'm like, this is amazing. Well, you wouldn't believe it, but 2 days later, I'm between services and I'm just trying to be a good Christian, and I'm at Canadian Tire and just trying to be a pastor. I'm in between services, like, God is so good. Walking in, bought a Keurig for the office to keep all the staff, fueled, doing God's work. And I was in there for about 10 minutes. And that's what pastors walk like. If you ever are wondering, if somebody's walking like this, around, just ask, what church do you pastor? And I come out after 10 minutes of being in Canadian Tire, and you will not believe it. Emma smashed up the right side of our car. I come out, and I looked on the side of our van, and all of a sudden there's some wires hanging. I'm like, well, this is interesting. So I put the Keurig inside. I make it safe and secure and I walk around, and I look at the front of our vehicle. It's the left side, not the right side, left side. And somebody has stolen our headlight. I'm not kidding you. And I'm super thankful for the blessing that van was for us during the time being. But this is a 2005 green Dodge Caravan. It's one of the ugliest vehicles on the road. I'm telling you. And someone chose to steal it in broad daylight between services, a pastor's van, So if you're listening to this message, like, it's on you. Like, you stole from a pastor. But I don't think that's how it works. But later on that night, I was sitting by myself, and I started hashing it out with God. I'm like, God, why does this have to happen to us? Like, I give so much back to you. I walk like a pastor in town. Like I'm a Christian. I'm a pastor. And the truth is that Emma and I had actually just made a financial gift to somebody and given, like, out of the generosity that's been given us, we were very generous with a gift. And I remember saying to God, like, God, I just gave something away. I thought that you said this. And all of a sudden, God started saying, well, why don't you count your blessings? Oh, this is not a game that you want to play with God. Because all of a sudden, I remember that there's 2 kids sleeping upstairs. They were in beds of their own, rooms of their own. Actually, I was sitting in a room in a house that was just purchased just a couple of months earlier after we gave a financial donation in Heart for the House that actually was a decision basically made saying, we're not going to be able to buy this house this year, and that's okay. We're going to still give back to God. And yet we were still able to get this house this past year. And you reminded me, yeah, what about the van that you're complaining about that was basically given to you this past year? What about the clothes that you're wearing on your back? What about the briefcase that you were just given because somebody felt like they needed to give it to you? What about the gym membership that somebody actually just paid for you for an entire year because out of their own heart they believed that God was telling them, like, listen, I need to bless you with this gym membership. What about, and all of a sudden, I'm not kidding you, it was almost like my mind went on this weird trip where God was just showing me blessing after blessing after blessing after blessing after blessing after blessing. And then I kind of felt this in my heart, and basically it said, you can never outgive me. These 9 guys, the moment that they're healed, you know what's going through their minds in this story. 9 guys healed. Immediately they're going, I've had years where I haven't been able to work. I've had years where I haven't seen my family. I've had years where I haven't been able to establish my empire here on earth. I've had years where I haven't been able to do this. And so their first response to getting healed is, let's go start counting all the things that we've got to get in order to get our lives on track. But there's one that says, listen, even though I have a lot to catch up on, the first thing that I need to count is that I am blessed before God, because I wouldn't even have the ability to work on that stuff if it wasn't for God. I need to go back and thank Him. Come on, it's counting your blessings results in you realizing and me realizing that we can never outgive God. No matter how hard we try, no matter how much we give, God can never be outgiven because He's the creator of everything that we think that we're giving. The materials to make that van were created by God. My kids were ultimately created by God. That house and the materials in that house created by God. The ability to actually buy that house provided by God. We cannot outgive God. Secondly, when you turn back, you need to take a knee. This is interesting, but we live in a society that doesn't want to bow down to God. But as Romans 14:11 says, it is written, as surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me. Every tongue will acknowledge that I am God. Here's the thing, and this is the truth about the way that we are living life. We will either bow our knee in this life towards God, or we will have to bow our knee in the next life towards God. But I want to do it willingly in this life so that when I get to that next life, there is no question where I stand with God. I want to bow my knee now. But so many of us want to be self-made millionaires. And if we don't want to be self-made millionaires, we want to be self-made visionaries, self-made working men, working women, self-made academics, self-made parents, self-made employees, self-made. And the truth is that the only way that we can actually experience the full blessing of God in our lives is that if we actually take a knee before God and humble ourselves and say, everything that I've got actually came from you anyway, and it's not my right to just sit here and pretend like everything I've got is mine. And so I'm going to turn back to you and actually acknowledge that you have provided everything that I've ever been given. I started in a squash league, and I was starting to get good in recreational squash, and so I went into the squash club thinking, like, I'm going to be pretty good. And so they contacted me, like, you're in this league, what division should we put you in? And I'm like, I don't know, whatever the best division is, put me in there. And he's like, well, explain a little bit about yourself. And then, anyways, I got it back. I got put into Division 6. And I'm like, these guys have no clue what they're talking about. Like, they don't know how good I am. I just figured 6 was worse than 1, so. Anyway, I get put into this league, and I read through the list, and there's some names that trigger me. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be able to beat these people. The first game that I had was against Laura. And I was like, okay, like, great, let's go in. And I come in, and it's this petite little girl, and like very small. And I come in, and I'm like, what is this? Gender had nothing to do with it, just size comparison. I'm like, oh, okay. Let me teach you how to play squash. But anyway, I think you know where this story's going. I need to get it out before you hear about it through somebody else. Laura beat me. So the next game comes up on my schedule, and it's against Heather. And I thought, well, I got duped by Laura. I'm definitely not getting duped by Heather. As I expected to walk in and find a petite woman. And I remember saying in my head, it is more embarrassing to lose to somebody who's smaller than me than to just like beat them like crazy. So I'm just going to go in there and hold nothing back. Well, I walked in and I was expecting to find somebody like Laura, a young, petite woman that I was going to have to teach how to play squash and actually get beat. And I walk in and there's a 70-year-old woman named Heather. So I walk in and I'm like, what is this league? And I'm like, remember, Brandon, remember. It's more embarrassing to lose to your grandma than to just smash her in squash, 3 straight sets, I get beat by Heather. I'm like, funny, time to take off the mask. It's like a younger, like, pro squash player in there. Like, she had the audacity to say, like, you want to just play another game for fun? And I'm like, get out of here, Heather. It's time for tea time. Like, get out of here. I was humbled. What the Bible tells us about the narrative of humanity is that we will have to eventually bow our knee, or we can actually bow it now. You will be humbled, or you can choose to be humble. When we try to be self-made people, what it actually ends up doing is it causes us to work ourselves to a fault and work ourselves to a tire and work ourselves till we're burnt out because everything rests on us. But when we recognize that everything that we have is from God and we humble ourselves and say, wait a second, I didn't work to get any of this stuff myself anyway. I thought the work I was putting in is what resulted me in this, but we actually recognize that the blessing came from God. What it enables us to do is to fall at the feet of Jesus and say, listen, I've been working so hard, but the blessing came from you. So if I'm worried about the blessing, I'm just going to keep turning back to you because I know that you're the one that brought it to me. You're the one that can actually keep it with me. I don't need to fear whether or not I'm working hard enough to keep the blessing or gain more blessing, but I can actually just recognize that the blessing was yours all along. See, the leper turned back to God because he realized that the blessing, the true blessing, was not in getting the healing, but was in coming into close standing with Jesus. You notice at the beginning of the story, people are standing away from Jesus. Heal me, heal me, heal me. It's not until this man returns and humbles himself that he comes from the proximity of yelling at Jesus to actually being able to walk right up to him and actually experience the intimacy of what it means to do life with Jesus. Here's the thing. Is we can continue to build our empires, but what it will cause us to do is cause us to keep seeking, keep searching, keep looking for all the different things that we want to fulfill that deep desire in us. Or we can recognize that from the beginning, we were wired to have relationship with God. And if we would just humble ourselves and turn back and go over and bow a knee before God, we will get the very thing we've been looking for all along, which is intimacy with God and not just the blessings of God. We've got to turn back and take a knee. And finally, we need to turn back and be a blessing. And this is important because so often we expect that as long as I get what's owed to me, then I'm going to be able to conquer. I'm going to have more stuff than my neighbor. I'm going to have stuff that's going to show my parents I made something of my life. I'm going to have stuff that's going to show my siblings that I did more in this life than they did. I'm going to have stuff that shows my grandparents that I'm a worthy grandchild. I'm going to have stuff that's going to show the other employees around me that I earned a spot in this promotion. And the problem with all of this is that we were never blessed to be blessed. Hashtag blessed life is really just like a code word for saying like, I just want more and I'm selfish. Hashtag blessed for others is actually the heart of God, where we say, hey, I've been blessed to actually bless other people because the blessing is actually meant to be flow through me and not be stopped within me. Blessing is not something that we hoard, but it's actually something that we deliver. Blessing is not something that we're just given, it's something that should flow through us. And I was having a conversation this past week, and we're going to end on this. I was having a conversation this past week with a guy, and he was telling me this story, and this is a guy that's been highly successful in his company, and in fact, he's retired now, but one of the largest companies in Canada, and he was one of the top executives. And I was sitting with him, and I was just thinking, like, how did you get there? And basically he started outlaying a lot of what I've talked about tonight. Stay humble. Recognize who gave you what you got. But he told this story. He said, back when I was in high school, I was in cross country. And so I relate to this because I used to be a cross country runner. And he said, there was a meet that we went to, and my coach pulled me aside, and we'll use Rob. He said, Rob, he said, you can win this race today. And he's like, well, that's cool, thanks. He's like, you have the potential to cross that finish line first today. And Rob said to his coach, like, that's great. But his coach said to him, he said, but Rob, I don't want you to. He said, you see, we have a potential, not for you to win the race today, but we actually have a potential as a school to actually come first at this meet today. And he said, so what I need you to do, because in cross country, you combine all the positions of your entire team and across all the other teams, all different age groups and both genders, and you combine all of those points, and whoever has the lowest amount of points because they scored the lowest in their positioning in the race, that's the school that wins. And he said, listen, this is what I want you to do. He said, usually you go out and you just win the race, but what I want you to do today is I want you to go out and I want you to set the pace for the people around you. So I want you to go out and actually slow down the whole pace. Then can you do this for me? About halfway through, do you mind running back and turning back and actually going and getting the second, third, and fourth place teammates and bring them back up to the front? Could you do that for me, Rob? And he said, the battle was real. He's like, I could cross the finish line first here. And he said, like, I don't know. And he said, Rob, can you do this for me? And so he said, I remember going out and starting the race, and I'm in first. And all of a sudden, the point in the race came where I had to turn back and I had to make a decision. Am I in this for me, or am I in it for a team win? And he said, at that moment, I made a decision that I've never regretted in my entire life. I turned back. He said, you know how weird it was to watch people run past me? When you're turning back, do you know how weird it's going to be to watch some people passing you in life? Cutting the system, cutting corners on their taxes, cutting corners on not giving back to God what's rightfully His, cutting corners on what it means to actually spend time with your kids and not just put them in front of you. You know what? You're going to see some people passing you, and you're going to wonder, oh my goodness, am I doing the right thing? But he said he went back, and he didn't just grab the second, third, and fourth guy. He got the fifth guy and the sixth guy just for added measure. And he goes back, and he said, from that point forward, I brought them through the rest of the pack. And at the point where my coach said, that's where you can let loose, I started running my heart out, and all of a sudden I came first in the race, and I look behind me, and all of a sudden my teammates are following me, and we finished first in the race as a team. But not only was that, but my coach had convinced every other person and every other great runner on all the other teams to do the exact same thing. And so as a school that day, we won as an entire school that meet. And I'm just thinking in my head, and I'm thinking about what it means to be a Christian and what it means to receive the blessings of God. And I'm thinking there are some blessed people in this place tonight. But I want to ask you, do you want to get to the end of your life and then hold up a trophy that you did more than your peers? Or Or do you want to go through this life with a measure of success that I brought a bunch of people with me and we crossed the finish line together and we ran the race together, and I didn't just do it by myself, but I turned back and grabbed others with me, and the blessing of God did not stop in me, but it actually flowed through me, and I was blessed to be a blessing to others. Church, we have an incredible opportunity in 2019 in an affluent city to say, you know what? We're not just going to help students on St. Patrick's Day. We're also going to donate and give our time to House of Friendship. But we're also going to give ourselves to a church and volunteer and give our time and our finances to a church that has seen people come into God like we haven't seen before in a long, long time. And you know what? I'm not only going to do that, but I'm actually going to call my parents on the weekend. You know what? I'm not only going to do that, but I'm going to actually spend time with my kids. And you know what? I'm not only going to do that, but I'm going to reform my entire view of what it means to have money, and I'm actually going to direct it and shape it after God's desire for my life. But I'm not only going to do that, I'm going to bring everybody along with me that I can, because this race is not an individual race, but it's a race towards God, and we're all in it together. You realize that opportunity we have is the opportunity of a lifetime. It's time to turn back. Can we stand up in this place? You know, what I love about this story is that it's actually the gospel story. You know, if you don't understand giving, you don't understand the gospel. But maybe you don't even understand the gospel and you're wondering, what is all this? You know, similarly to the Samaritan that was a leper outside the city, our sin actually separates us from God quite a distance. But Jesus always finds us on the outskirts of where we think we should be. And he finds us in the midst of whatever it is that we think is holding us back from relationship with him. And truthfully, he's the one that approaches us, even though we're not even sure if he would want to come near to us. And I want to encourage you in this place tonight that if you've never made a decision to follow Jesus, I want to encourage you that God is actually chasing you. When you thought you were running from him, he's still chasing you. When you thought that he didn't want anything to do with you, he's got his arms wide open. He died on a cross for your sin while you were still sinners, while you were still a sinner, so that you could be brought back in a relationship with him. That's why all of us stand here and we worship God, because we recognize that without him we are nothing. So if you're in this place tonight, every head bowed and eye closed, we're not going to point anybody out. We're not going to manipulate anybody. But maybe the reality of Jesus turning back to get you is something that you need to accept today. It says in the Bible that whoever believes in their heart and confesses with their mouth that Jesus is Lord will spend eternity with him. So in just a moment, I'm going to ask you, if you want to make a decision to follow Jesus, I'm going to ask you that you put up your hand, because I truly believe that taking moments like this to just symbolize outwardly what God is doing inwardly it's just so important. So if you're here today and you want to make a decision, again, I'm not going to manipulate you, every head bowed and every eye closed. If you want to make a decision to follow Jesus, could you just lift up a hand? Thank you. I see that hand. Anyone else? I see that hand. Come on, this is a powerful decision. You don't have to be ashamed of this. This is the best decision you could ever make in your life. Anyone else? I'm going to stay here for one more moment.
Thanks so much for watching. If you were impacted by the message today, you can send us an email at mystory@slatechurch.com. And if you'd like to learn more, you can fill out one of our online Connect cards. We would love to see you at one of our Sunday services. And make sure to stay connected by following us on any of our social media, including Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.